Democratic presidential candidate Joseph Biden today faces a controversy. 3 weeks ago at a debate at the Iowa State Fair, he used phrases identical to those delivered by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock.
Biden seemed to be claiming Kinnock's vision and life as his own.
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Gladys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania don't come up after 12 hours and play football.
8 hours underground and then come up and play football.
It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
There was no platform upon which they could stand.
The notion that every thought or notion or idea you'd have to go back and find and attribute to someone, I think is, quite frankly, ludicrous.
The problem here is that Senator Biden told his audience he'd just been thinking about these things, and he failed to give any credit at all to his famous British speechwriter.
You know, I was thinking on the way over here. Now, that's a little too much, because, as you point out, what's behind the words? What's there? And a lot of people, the rap on Biden has always been that it's just a surface.
I should have said, to paraphrase Neil Kinnock, it's the only time I didn't, and all the times I've ever used it.
But CBS News found a tape of a second instance.
It reappeared in the New York Times with a new charge, that Biden had appropriated a famous litany from the late Robert Kennedy about what the gross national product cannot measure.
It cannot measure the health of our children,
The health of our children,
the quality of our education,
the quality of their education,
the joy of their play,
or the joy of their play.
Biden gave Kennedy no credit. He has also quoted or paraphrased John Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, and British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock, all without credit.
Joseph Biden admitted today that he committed plagiarism when he was in law school. He said it was a mistake, but that it was unintentional.
He quoted 5 pages of someone else's work without proper citation.
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again.
He was given an F.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been dumb.
To the political community in Washington, it all seems of a piece. Plagiarism at law school, plagiarism on the stump.
The great communicator. Strike that. The great imitator.
You don't steal verbatim, or when you do, as he did 99% of the time, you give credit.
Biden's critics say he sells himself as a man whose words and visions can inspire a new generation in politics. But if the thoughts, phrases, and visions really belong to others, it's a form of false advertising.
Is it a wise idea, though, to take something that personal, anyway, from another politician and try and appropriate it to your own campaign?
I think it was a stupid thing to appropriate material that was really very personal, that was someone else's.
Most people didn't know who he was, you know, Joe Biden, and now they're going to say, oh yeah, he's the guy who plagiarized.
That's a lot of people.
Politically, that's devastating.
These clips are devastating. He looks like a Joe Biden wind-up doll with somebody else's words coming out.
If they're going to do things that are stupid as well as immoral, then they're probably too dumb to have the job of president.
Voters are going to have to decide whether he was dishonest or dumb.
Senator Joseph Biden may have more explaining to do.
The new questions stem from taped remarks of Biden during an April campaign appearance in New Hampshire.
I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Went back to law school and, in fact, ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only needed 123 credits.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class, and won only 1 degree, not 3.
Joe Biden ranked 76th in a class of 85 at the University of Syracuse Law School. I mean, this guy comes off this whole thing as a flyweight.
Now Biden says Newsweek is right. His memory had failed him.
And I'd be delighted to sit down and compare my IQ to yours if you'd like, Frank.
Joe Biden was victimized by the truth.
Bye-bye Biden. He may not know it yet, but I think this is going to be very difficult for him to recover.
Is Joe Biden dead meat, yes or no?
I think so.
Bob?
It's in terminal condition.
Terminal. Eleanor?
Yes, unless he comes in third in Iowa.
Morton?
Dying.
I say dead. We'll be right back.
Now to the controversy that has suddenly erupted around the Democratic presidential candidate Joseph Biden, the charge that he has plagiarized parts of his speeches. Today, Biden was forced to take time out from his Judiciary Committee duties to hold a press conference to answer two charges: that he copied part of a paper when in law school, and recently adopted as his own quotations from the Kennedys and other politicians. The story surfaced last weekend when the New York Times compared a Biden conclusion in a debate in Iowa to a well-received speech delivered last year by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock. First Kinnock, then Biden.
Why am I the first Kinnock in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Was it because all our predecessors were thick? Did they lack talent? Those people who could sing and play and recite and write poetry? Those people who could make wonderful, beautiful things with their hands? Those people who could dream dreams, see visions? But why didn't they get it? Was it because they were weak? Those people who could work 8 hours underground and then come up and play football? Weak? Those women who could survive 11 childbearings? Were they weak? Does anybody really think that they didn't get what we had because they didn't have the talent or the strength or the endurance or the commitment? Of course not. It was because there was no platform upon which they could stand.
And I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to a university? Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college? Is it because our fathers and mothers were not bright? Is it because I'm the first Biden in 1,000 generations to get a college and a graduate degree that I was smarter than the rest? Those same people who read poetry and wrote poetry and taught me how to sing verse? Is it because they didn't work hard? My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania and would come up after 12 hours and play football for 4 hours? No, it's not because they weren't as smart. It's not because they didn't work as hard. It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
Today, Biden moved to confront the controversy that faces his presidential campaign. Jeff Goldman reports.
Reporters packed a Capitol Hill news conference to hear Senator Biden's response to the plagiarism allegations. He was asked if he indeed studied the Kinnock videotape.
The answer is yes. I looked at that tape. I was moved by that tape. We sat down, I turned it on, I said, my Lord, look at this guy. Look at what he is expressing here. And I looked at it once and I didn't have to look at it again. And what I would do out on the stump, I'd say, I saw a tape from Neil Kinnock where he stands there and he's angry. And he looks out at his people and he says, why am I the first Kinnock ever to go to a university? It doesn't take much if you feel that, folks. You don't have to look at that 10 times. I saw that and it was a connect. I mean, I could tell how that man felt. And it's how I feel. It's how I feel about what my party's about and what I'm about.
Biden also defended his use of unattributed quotations in his campaign speeches.
The fact of the matter is, every time that I have been aware that it has been someone else's quote, I have used it. As a matter of fact, the criticism of me by the press, with good reason, has been in part in this campaign that I quote too many people, that I quote Kennedy all the time, I quote King all the time, I quote Humphrey all the time. So what I'm saying to you is that if and when I've ever quoted anyone without saying this is their quote, it's either because, as I say in some speeches, listen, can you hear the voices? Let the word go forth. I don't quote anybody, everybody knows that. When I haven't attributed, it's either because, in fact, it's been clearly known by everyone what it is, or I honestly did not know I was quoting somebody else.
A third charge leveled against Biden alleged that as a first-year law student at Syracuse University, he plagiarized a law review article in a legal brief prepared for class.
I took the cases out of the Law Review article and the footnotes out of the Law Review article, and I thought what I was doing honestly was the right way to do it, and the representation about what the case said from the Law Review article. And then at the end of the Law Review article, when they set out and said, this is what all this means, I wrote that in my paper, what the conclusion of the Law Review article, and I footnoted it. Now, folks, the footnote, I'm footnoting a Law Review article in a 15-page paper where I use 5 pages of the 15 pages out of the Law Review, which refer to the cases. And then as the conclusion comes up, I cite the conclusion, footnote 21, Law Review article, what page it occurs at the end of this citation. I was wrong, but I was not malevolent in any way. And so this young fella, who apparently somebody's found, some other campaign's found, great, I knew he'll already be around somewhere one day, found, and he went as a good young fella, and he said, hey, professor, this guy didn't do it the right way. Brought it to the professor brought it to the dean said, explain yourself, Biden. And I wrote, which you will get, it's in my record here, I wrote a 2-page letter explaining why I had been so stupid, but that I did not intentionally move to mislead anybody. I didn't.
Biden was then asked what effect these allegations would have on his presidential campaign.
I don't think it will have any effect, but I don't know. You all will make the judgment about that. It'll all depend on how you write it. I don't mean that. I'm not being smart. It'll all depend on the American people looking at me. They're going to look at me and say, is Joe Biden being honest with me? Or is Joe Biden not being honest with me? I'm being honest. When I marched in the civil rights movement, I did not march with a 12-point program. I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes. And we changed attitudes. When I was 17 years old, like many of you, I participated in sit-ins to desegregate the restaurants and movie houses of Wilmington, Delaware. I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff. During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city. You know, when I was a teenager in Delaware, for real, I got involved in the civil rights movement. We have the 8th largest black population in America. Most people don't know that. And I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact. But I got my education, Reverend Doc, in the black church. Not a joke. Because when we used to get organized on Sundays to go out and desegregate movie theaters and things like that, we'd do it through the black church. I was no big shakes, Reverend, in the civil rights movement. I was just a kid. I got involved in desegregating movie theaters and helping, you may remember Reverend Moyer in Delaware and Herman Holloway organized voter registration drives, coming out of black churches on Sunday, figuring how we were going to move. In October, I was invited to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis to receive the Freedom Award, a thing when I sat in black churches in the east side of Wilmington getting ready to, and by the way, next to two Jewish rabbis, getting ready to go out and desegregate movie theaters in Delaware. I never, ever thought in my life I would be worthy of, and I'm still not sure I'm worthy of it.
Here are just 5 examples. Number 1, his arrest in apartheid South Africa. The former vice president said 3 times during the month of February alone that he got arrested trying to see Nelson Mandela in prison.
I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
Except it's a lie. Biden himself was forced to fess up on CNN.
When I said arrested, I meant I was not able to move. Cops, Afrikaners would not let me go with them, made me stay where I was. I guess I wasn't arrested, I was stopped.
To be clear, he didn't misspeak, he didn't misremember, it wasn't a gaffe, it was a lie, and a really bad one, because he even claimed at one point last month that Mandela later thanked him for getting arrested. Number 2, there's the silver star that never was. Over the years, Biden has told a moving but false war story in speeches and at rallies. He did it in New Hampshire last August.
This guy climbed down a ravine, carried this guy up on his back under fire, and the general wanted me to pin the silver star on him. I got up there and stand, this is God's truth, my word is a Biden. He stood at attention. I went to pin him, I said, sir, I don't want the damn thing. Do not pin it on me, sir, please, sir, do not do that. He died. He died.
He didn't pin the medal on the guy, who wasn't a Navy captain. He just made it up. And Biden has told this story time and again over the years, changing the details in it ever so slightly on each occasion. So sorry, it's not a gaffe, it's pure misrepresentation. Then there's Iraq, where the former vice president says he only voted for the war because the Bush administration tricked him.
I made a mistake. I said it 14 years ago. I trusted George Bush to keep his word. He said he was not going to go into Iraq.
Except Biden was calling for war with Saddam Hussein in 1998.
The only way we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and it's going to require guys like you in uniform to be back on foot in the desert taking taking Saddam down.
He also says now that he opposed the Iraq war as soon as it started.
From the moment shock and awe started, from that moment, I was opposed to the effort and I was outspoken.
A complete fabrication. Here he is several months after the invasion began, praising both the war and George Bush.
Some of my own party have said that it was a mistake to go to Iraq in the first place. But the cost of not acting against Saddam, I think, would have been much greater. The President of the United States is a bold leader and he is popular.
Again, Biden just makes stuff up. He makes demonstrably false claims without an iota of shame. Number 4, there's Biden's role in the civil rights movement, which is pretty easy to summarize. He didn't have one.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes. And we changed attitudes.
When I was about the age of the guy standing over there, I got involved in the civil rights movement.
He knows it's untrue. Don't take my word for it. Take his.
I was not an activist. I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else.
Imagine as a white guy lying about your role in the civil rights struggle. Finally, you all know that Biden had to quit his 1988 campaign after he was caught plagiarizing parts of his stump speech. But Biden also lied about his grades.
I think I probably have a much higher IQ than you do, I suspect. The first year in law school, I decided I didn't want to be in law school and ended up in the bottom 2/3 of my class, and then decided I wanted to stay, went back to law school, and in fact ended up in the top half of my class.
In fact, he graduated 76th in a law school class of 85 students.
They don't know is the great president with a new record low approval rating who says men can get pregnant would never lie. For a full report on how Biden would never lie, let's throw it over to our Biden correspondent, Sam Donaldson.
Biden may have more explaining to do.
The new questions stem from taped remarks of Biden during an April campaign appearance in New Hampshire.
I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Went back to law school and in fact ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only needed 123 credits.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class, and won only 1 degree, not 3.
There you have it. We can confidently say,
in case you've forgotten, here's what Joe Biden looked like during the last presidential campaign.
Look,
Tomorrow's Superstar Tuesday, and I want to thank you all. I tell you what, I'm rushing ahead, aren't I? 150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability. It would put 720 million women back in the workforce. Nobody should be in jail for a nonviolent crime. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. What's not to like about Vermont in terms of the beauty of it? And what a neat town. Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. We choose science over fiction. We choose truth over facts. Think about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
So that's the polite version of what happened that day. Here's the scene moments later with Barack Obama, the rudest president in American history. Obama never liked Joe Biden, and he's hardly going to start pretending to now. We should warn you, this is horrible. Out his hands like a doll for no obvious reason.
Just in terms of inflation, because you had told us at a town hall, I think it was in July, that this was just near-term inflation. The Wall Street Journal recently talked to like 67.
Are you threatening me?
Those
Totally unfounded. I am the great Cornholio. I'm a gringo. I have no bunghole. Bungholio. Is this the lobby? I am Cornholio. I need TV for my bunghole.
Yes, Mr. President.
I am Cornholio. My bunghole, it goes...
Mr. President. Mr. President, I can't make out what you're saying. Sir, the President sounds strange. Something's going on. I don't think it's a drill.
Sir, we're awaiting your final orders. I order you to surrender your teepee. I am Cornholio. You will cooperate with my bunghole. For there is but one bunghole. The almighty bunghole.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm running for President of the United States. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other person. I just spoke at Dartmouth on health care at the medical school, or not, I guess I wasn't actually on the campus, but the people from the medical school were at the, I want to be clear, I'm not going nuts. I'm not sure whether it was a medical school or where the hell I spoke, but it was on the campus. I want to thank Rich Fitzgerald, the county executive, Allegheny County executive, for being here. And I propose, and I'm going to digress slightly. We're in a situation. The president asked me to head up a cancer moonshot.
President Biden, just to be clear, would you or would you not rejoin the TPP? Yes or no?
I would not rejoin the TPP as it was initially put forward. In Guatemala, El Salvador, and to win and say in Honduras and say, look. I know I'm called middle class, Joe. It's not meant as a compliment. Means I'm not sophisticated. And there's an area where there's an important difference between the candidates. I'm running. The country wasn't built by Wall Street bankers, CEOs, and hedge fund managers. This guy is moving to just foment hate. The price for whatever the drug costs are. Well, folks, eliminate one tax loophole out of $1.6 trillion worth, $1.4 trillion worth. Out of $1.4 billion. It's hard to even say it, it's so much. And by the way, it's cost a lot of money. It cost about $740 billion over 10 years. Every single solitary person qualified in community college, increasing number of 6 to 9 million people. If you like
your employer-based policy, you can keep that policy. If you agree with me, go to Joe 30330 and help me in this fight. If you want to be part of this campaign, pick up your phones. Pick up your phones. Now, send a text to the word United to the number 30330. 30330 or 303-330 or BOO. Wait. You got it. It's on the back there. Now he's feeling the pressure of an economy that's teetering on a recession. To say that LGBTQT people have no civil rights. And immediately changed the law in the state of Delaware protecting transgender people. I took on Putin in terms of in terms of what was going on in Ukraine. My long friend, time friend, and she's a friend. She's been my friend in and out of public life. It will cost 1/30th. Costs a lot of money. Almost $740 billion to do what I want to do over 10 years. But not $30 trillion. Not $30 trillion. Among many qualified people, I'm the best qualified person for this job. And the reason is not just to help people who have or in fact are likely to get Alzheimer's. Because think of what's been adopted. Milton Friedman's notion that the only obligation. But that all changed with our Republican friends in the late 80s when they adopted Milton Friedman's notion that the only obligation. We find ourselves in a position where you're in a circumstance where we've adopted Milton Friedman's notion, the conservative economist. Now, if in fact you are in a position, what was the case? You worked for Jimmy. That's why we're so special. It took courage. It took resilience. They know who we are. We have to let them know who we are. We can do it, and it's going to take billions of dollars to do it, and we can afford to do it. We can't afford not to do it. Cut in half the number of uninsured of the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Cut in half. Don't worry, I'm so serious. Children, I love to hear them. But President Trump and the demagogues around the world. But if Donald Trump is reelected, so people are figuring out there's not a damn thing we can do that we set our mind to that we can't get done. The single most stressed I was asked to speak to the American Psychiatric Association, to go over to the University of London and speak to the World Psychiatric Association. It's interesting. I just spoke to the International Society of Psychiatric, the International Organization of Psychiatrists, I forget the formal name of it, over in London because... This is not a Republican talking point. The Republicans are trying to kill Obamacare. Union workers, the UAW took incredible cuts in their future. Now we have $1.6 trillion worth of loopholes in the law. But I never ever thought that I'd see what I saw in Charlotte. You know, I came home from law school. Avoid having an excuse to walk by the dealer and say, no, I'm not going to be a mule. I got something to do. I got to go do boom, boom, boom. If we just were to reinstitute the CAFE standards. And I think Secretary, I wasn't the press going to say I'm downgrading him by calling him Senator Booker. The fact is that the bills that the future president here, that the senator is talking about. I was the one that suggested to the President Obama, I don't want to confuse presidents here. Look, we provide a Medicare option. That's exactly what Barack and I talked about in the beginning.
Couldn't get it through, though.
So I couldn't tell anybody but Barack. He's one of my closest friends. Invaded another country and annexed a significant portion of it called Crimea. Right. He's saying that it was my boss, it was his fault. I got assault weapons banned for 10 years. It had to be reauthorized because of hanging chads in Florida. The last president said, no, I'm not going to reauthorize it. We need to work again with Canada and Mexico as neighbors, not as adversaries. Saks or Benettons or Nike or whatever in the market in their places where the malls. Donald Trump does pose an exoskeleton to this. It's not hypothetical. We can put every one of them in school, cutting in half the cost of a four-year education. Why they do that? I ran the what they call the moonshot, dealing with cancer, and subsequently after that set up the Biden Cancer Initiative. And here's the point: the conservative columnist, and they'd say to you, "Take my shotgun." I said, "I have three. I now have five because my son died, and I have three of his. I have 5 shotguns." Also, have a mechanism to control drug prices. You know, it's not. We're no longer using chemical-based things. All this thing we're dealing with cancers and other issues related to the immune system are bio-oriented. And by the way, the idea that NATO, the only people who entitled to rewards are stockholders. Ladies and gentlemen, he is deliberately and completely ignoring the legitimate authority of the Congress, and he's doing what he does with the complicity. Stop trying to keep your workers organized. By his failure to exercise any international leadership. It's about all these breakthroughs we have with dealing with the whole, immune system. I want you to know, if you look at PolitiFacts, we're no longer the wealthiest middle class in the world. It means investing much more in medical research to conquer devastating diseases like cancer and addiction and Alzheimer's. The opportunities are amazing. We are in a position to be able to lead the world like we've never been able to do it before. I mean, they're not bad folks, but guess what? I found that the secretary, we sat together in many meetings. There's things that are worth dealing with China tough on. What presidents say matter. We also know we need teachers. My wife is a full-time teacher, taught all during when we were vice president. High-quality options. The public option will be available in my plan. We'll make sure it's not quality. We'll make sure it's only affordable. Quality that's affordable, not the end in themselves. It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. Not those of us running for president alone. Not just activists like you. You know how many tax loopholes there are in the code now? 1,640 billion. Eliminate one. How can a person dignity be maintained? We choose truth over facts. You ever heard a president of the United States talk about law enforcement like he does today? I oversaw, as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee a long time, the FBI. Look what he talks about. But we lead by the example of our power, not just the example of our power, but the example we're out there, and it's what we say. By strengthening. We have to eliminate the funding gap that exists between minority white and majority white and non-white districts. The fact of the matter is, I'm awfully sophisticated about why, how, and who built this country. Let me say this simply and clearly. They're not national assets. Wall Street bankers, CEOs, hedge fund managers, no matter how good and decent they are, they're not the ones who built this country. That triumph of democracy and liberalism over fascism and autocracy. When I got out of school, when Bobby Kennedy and Dr. King had been assassinated in the 70s, late 70s, when I got engaged. 1787, the United States Constitution. I want to publicly apologize for not being able to make it. We don't always live up to that's who we are. No other nation was founded the way we are. We hold these truths self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator. No nation has ever been founded on that principle. That was a time in the early and 60s, where it was drop out, go to Haight-Ashbury. We can do this by making sure that we're in a position that we, in fact, allow people. Time's up. I agree that everybody, once they should. Anyway, my time's up. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Vice President.
But here's the deal, folks. Well, I think it shouldn't matter where your race. We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
We can speak out and be more straightforward.
Senator Joe, I mean, but I mean, it's not about, I know you're supporting by saying booing, but look, here's the deal.
You don't have here in Miami, in Florida, you don't have it here, and that is if you keep an audience. That's why I'll end the gag rule, the global gag rule that prevents money from getting to NGOs. In terms of the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacy. And if we give Donald Trump 4 more years, we'll have a great deal of difficulty, if ever, being able to. I looked at it anyway. That's what I think my plan. I know what my plan does. Such as de-escalation studies have marked. Excuse me. There have been de-escalation studies.
The reason I did what I'm doing is because there's a invasion of Hispanics.
She has an expression. She teaches full-time and has taught full-time. She taught full-time as a second lady. She taught 15 credits a semester. She's never stopped teaching. She's going back in 2 weeks to teach as well, to continue to teach.
65 out of every 100 jobs today require training beyond high school. 65 out of every 100. $30 trillion.
That makes it far more durable, reliable, and powerful. And partnerships built on coercion. And Lisa, you have been a great friend for a long time. And your Paul son is remarkable. You know,
they also got that last year.
And for folks in the working class that are below 400, they will, in fact, increase their premiums. Will increase the generosity of the premium tax credit they now get. They go to school from a middle class or upper middle class, and having heard, the estimates are as many as 4 million more words spoken. You know, the next thing we got to do here along the line to report people's dignity, restore it. We're the most powerful military, not hyperbole, most powerful military in the history of the world. That's not hyperbole. Which we as a society talk about one another. The way we've always been. Look, my wife, who is a teacher, she's teaching now. She's back in the classroom at a community college where she teaches in Northern Virginia. Things changed. You had over 40 kids shot at Kent State on a beautiful lawn by the National Guard. There are a whole lot of things, and guess what?
Americans live up to that promise for most of the people at the time. The people of color, for women.
Farm ownership and cooperating loan and operating loans. I remember sometimes when my dad was restless, my mom would say, because our rooms are next to one another, I'd say, the next morning, what's wrong? She said, your dad can't sleep. He's just staring at the ceiling thinking, what happens? We have to start rewarding work, not just wealth. The first speech stood up. The former chancellor of Germany stands up. She says, we have to go to loan. International leaders spoke about it. You had people like you had people like the former chairman and leader of the party in Germany. You had Angela Merkel stand up and say how terrible it was. I mean, well, look, this is beyond the scope of anything remotely what we've seen before. We provide efficiency for appliances. That saves billions of gallons of gasoline. I mean, billions of $2.3 billion worth of, $500 billion in savings and 2-something billion metric tons of CO2 going in the air. Where an overwhelming number of families, ICE walks into a small Mississippi town and, in fact, arrests hundreds of workers. I was with a world leader in Indonesia who is a guy who is extremely well known and referred to as the Henry Kissinger of Asia. But I underestimated how deep the prejudice is in some sectors of society and how it can be unleashed. By investing $100 billion in education, in global warming efforts, it's a whole range of things. I was told when we were in office, demanding that HIV/AIDS be destigmatized and treated. And that's why we need to make post-secondary education affordable, available, and training, reducing the crushing cost of student loan debt.
What's not to like about Vermont in terms of the beauty of it? And what a neat town. I mean, this is sort of a scenic, beautiful town. We can't afford it by just eliminating, beginning to treat work, reward work as much as wealth. While Trump is pursuing a damaging and erratic trade war without any strategy, by the way.
Mr. Biden, they say these gaffes dim your electability.
Well, that's what we determine pretty soon, won't it?
Thanks, guys.